Come back to the version control GitHub Learning Unit. In part 2, we will introduce GitHub usage. We will cover how to create an account on GitHub, touching on types of users and local user authentication, how to add personal account tokens, Git commands used in GitHub, looking in detail at git clone, how to fork a repository, and git pull and git push. And lastly, we will discuss some useful GitHub features, namely Markdown, web pages for project hosting, Gits, and webhooks. The screenshots on the slide show how to create an account in GitHub. After clicking register in GitHub, the registration page is loaded. There you need to provide your email and password for account creation. An account is needed for GitHub in order to create a private public repository. Share code using private repository, or contribute to any repository. There are three types of user accounts: personal, organization, and enterprise. We will say more about this on the next slide. Collaborating with other developers in GitHub is simple using Git version control. Note that we suggest you create your own account and test the topics presented in the material. As mentioned in connection with the previous slide, there are three types of user accounts. Every user on GitHub logs in with a personal account. An organization account facilitates collaboration between multiple personal accounts, whereas an enterprise account enables the centralized control of multiple organizations. For research and education, GitHub Campus Program provides free access to GitHub Enterprise Cloud and GitHub Enterprise Server to institutions that wish to maximize the use of GitHub for their community. The GitHub Campus Program is a package of premium GitHub access for education-centric institutions that award degrees, diplomas, or certificates. The GitHub Campus Program includes free access to GitHub Enterprise Cloud and GitHub Enterprise Server for the whole organization's technical and academic departments, 50,000 minutes of GitHub Actions and 50 gigabytes of GitHub package storage, training for instructors to master Git and GitHub, free development teams tools for GitHub partners and exclusive access to future features, access to premium GitHub educational features such as GitHub Student Development Pack or an automated basis. To authenticate their local computer and Git with GitHub, a user must generate a secure shell SSH key pair, public and private key. For the generation of the key, a user must execute the commands you can see on the slide. The first command generates the key, which is the SSH key gen, as you can see with your email near. The second command shows the public key, cat key.pub. The third command notifies the SSH agent that it will handle another SSH key, the eval, as you can see it. And the last command adds the key to the SSH agent, SSH add key. The public key is requested by GitHub for authentication and authorization of the computer and user, along with the username and password. To let GitHub know about you and authorize you when you set code to Git repository, you need to add the SSH key to your account on GitLab. So, for user authorization and authentication, of course, over GitHub and Git at the local computer, you need to execute the following steps. In the upper right corner of any page, check your profile photo and then click Settings. In the user settings sidebar, click SSH and PGP keys. Then click New SSH key or Add SSH key. Add a descriptive label to the title column for the new key. Choose either the authentication or signing key type. Authentication is the most appropriate selection. Select Add SSH key. If all are OK, you will see your key in the list of SSH keys added to the GitHub. Personal access tokens, PATs, are used as passwords for the usernames in GitHub. In order to authenticate to GitHub and for GitHub to let the users change their repositories via Git commands. Personal access tokens function like ordinary OAuth access tokens and authenticate access to the GitHub API. They can be used instead of a password for Git over HTTPS or can be used to authenticate to the API over basic authentication. This slide shows how to generate a personal access token for the repositories in the Git account. To create a personal access token, navigate to the development settings section of your GitHub account settings. Choose to generate a new token from the personal access token option. Then add the node and enter a description and select the expiration drop-down menu to give the token an expiration period of date. Next, select repo as the scope. The generated token will be valid for all the specific repository operations. The last step is to click the Generate Token button at the end of the page. GitHub will display the personal access token only once. Ensure that you copy the token and store it in a safe. GitHub is built to use Git. Git commands are capable of performing all actions discussed previously. For sophisticated tasks, the command line is essential. This slide shows the most important Git commands that each Git user should know, or GitHub user should know. First, git init is used to initialize a local folder so that Git can identify it as a repository. Git remote-v allows you to browse remote repositories. Purpose. When you clone a repository with git clone, the files from the remote repository are downloaded to your computer and a connection is created to retrieve all changes made by other users since the last time you pulled or cloned the repository. The git pull command should be used. Git push can transfer local changes to a remote repository. To create a new branch, use the git checkout-b with a new branch name. And to change the working branch, use git checkout and the working branch name. Git diff displays the differences between the most recent version you pull and the local unstaged change. What is unstaged? Changes that have not yet been placed on the staging area -index. Git status can be used to determine which files were modified, while git add, file name or star is used to add a file or folder to the staging area. Staging area /index in preparation for the next commit. To commit the staged files, execute git commit -m and the comment, for example update. Use git restore a file name to undo the modifications of the file name. And lastly, when you are ready to add your modifications to the default branch, you merge the feature branch into it with the use of git merge and the branch name. We will look at some of these commands in more detail in the following slides. To copy a repository to a local computer, the git clone command should be used locally. First, the user should go to the GitHub project that they are interested in working with, or create a new project, and then use the provided URL and project name as shown in the slide. Then execute the git clone command as shown in the figure. This slide shows how to fork a repository in GitHub. To fork a repository is to create a separate repository. A fork is a copy of a repository. It allows you to experiment freely with changes without affecting the original project. To make a fork in GitHub, we need to select fork in the upper left of the project and select create a new fork. The create a new fork page is displayed, which lets you to create a fork of the selected project to your account. This slide shows how to execute git pull /push commands in the local repository. The git pull command is the same as git fetch plus a git merge. Thus, the local repository gets the newest changes from the git branch and merges them with the existing changes. The git push command sends back changes to the branch that is created. Note that before you execute git push, you need to commit the changes in your repository. So you must do git add and git commit-c comment. In this slide, we show how to make the pull request via GUI. In this and the following slides, we will look at some useful features that GitHub programmers can use. The first one is using Markdown for documentation. Markdown is a lightweight markup language that you can use to add formatting elements to plain text documents. The basic syntax of the elements used is outlined in John Gruber's original design document. Note that all Markdown applications support these elements. The slide shows an example of Markdown documentation from the Wi-Fi service. For more information about the language, go to https://www.markdownguide.org /cheat-sheet/. GitHub allows developers to create web pages from scratch for themselves or their projects simply by using a wizard in the same way they create a repository. To begin with, GitHub asks for the Git client you are using. Next, create a repository as shown in the slide 1. The user must then clone the created repository to the local computer. Next, create a file index.html with some HTML code inside the repository. Afterwards, push the HTML file to the repository on GitHub with the commands git add --all, git commit -m with a comment, and git push -u origin main. You have now finished, and the web page is shown at the URL username.github.io. GIST are small pieces of code or ideas related to a project that can be shared through GitHub. From GitHub, everyone can create both public and secret GISTs. If you are ready to share your ideas with the world, create a public GIST. Otherwise, create a private GIST. To see other user GISTs, navigate to their GIST homepage by using the search bar at the gists.github.com. If you know the user's username, you can navigate directly to their GIST homepage at the following address: gists.github.com/username. To create a GIST, go to the GIST homepage, write the description idea, upload a file, and choose the type of GIST to share. The slide shows the page for creating GIST. Along with an example, Search for GIS dimension nren. Webhooks can be described as service hooks. They define what to do on commit. Do something on commit. Webhooks allows you to build or set up integrations such as GitHub apps or OAuth apps which subscribe to certain events on github.com. When one of these events is triggered, the system will send an HTTP post payload to the webhook's configured URL. Webhooks can be installed on an organization, a specific repository, or a GitHub app. Once installed, the webhook will be sent each time one or more subscriber events occur. GitHub sets a limit of 20 webhooks for each event on each installation target. When configuring a webhook, you can use the UI or API to choose which events will send you payloads. Only subscribe to the specific events you plan on handling to limit the number of HTTP requests to your server. When a new webhook is created, GitHub sends a simple ping event to the user to inform that it has been set up correctly. Thank you for following part 2 of the GitHub Learning Unit. In the third part, we will see how to use Git in GitHub.